The silence in the grand ceremonial hall shattered as Emperor Vexus of the Tarkani Empire watched his son collapse to the floor in tears, a human janitor kneeling beside him. In that moment, as the human's weathered hands gently tied the royal child's ceremonial shoes, the Emperor realized his empire's understanding of humanity had been catastrophically wrong. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I always love chatting with you, and it really helps support the channel. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. This extraordinary encounter took place aboard the Celestial Nexus, the most prestigious diplomatic station in known space, where the janitor named Ray Thompson had spent the last 3 years scrubbing floors while the grand civilizations of the galaxy negotiated their futures. Ray's mop squeaked against the polished obsidian floor as he worked the night shift in the eastern wing of the Celestial Nexus. The station rotated in perfect synchronization with the nearby nebula, creating an ever-present purple glow through the massive viewports that lined the diplomatic sector. Most species found the light soothing, but it played tricks on human eyes, casting strange shadows that made Ray's job more challenging. After 3 years aboard the station, he'd grown used to it. At 47, Ray had the sturdy build of someone who'd spent his life doing physical labor. His hair had gone mostly gray, but his eyes remained sharp and observant. The station employed over 200 janitorial staff, but only 7 humans. Most civilizations considered it strange that humans would accept such positions, but Earth's integration into the galactic community was still new. Humans took whatever jobs they could get. The Eastern Wing housed the Tarkani delegation, one of the most powerful empires in the sector. Ray had specific instructions for cleaning their area. Never make eye contact, never speak unless spoken to, and under no circumstances enter their private quarters unless specifically ordered. The Tarkani were notoriously private and considered humans to be primitive, barely worth acknowledging. Ray finished mopping the central corridor and moved toward the grand ceremonial hall. According to his schedule, it should be empty at this hour. The Tarkani preferred to conduct their business during what they called the Ascendant period, which had ended 3 hours ago. Ray pushed his cleaning cart through the doorway and froze. The ceremonial hall wasn't empty. A small figure sat on the edge of the elevated platform where the Tarkani conducted their diplomatic rituals. Even from a distance, Ray could tell it was a child, and not a human one. The proportions were slightly wrong, the head larger and more angular, the limbs a bit too long. A Tarkani child, Ray's first instinct was to back away quietly. Interaction with a Tarkani youth, especially one who might be of noble birth, could cost him his job or worse. But then he heard the sound, a soft, high-pitched keening that humans might not recognize as crying. But Ray had raised 3 children of his own. He knew distress when he heard it, regardless of species. Against his better judgment, Ray approached slowly. "Hey there," he said softly, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" The Tarkani child looked up, startled. Their skin had the characteristic silver-blue sheen of their species, with faint bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with emotion. Currently, those patterns were flashing in rapid distress. The child's eyes were larger than a human's, solid black with no visible pupil, but the tears that streaked down their face were unmistakable. "You're not supposed to speak to me," the child said in perfect English, though the vocal cadence had the typical Tarkani musical quality. "You're a servitor." Ray nodded. "You're right. I'm just the janitor. But you seemed upset. And where I come from, we check on kids when they're crying. Human thing, I guess." The child wiped at their face with long, slender fingers. "I'm not crying. Tarkani nobility doesn't cry." "My mistake," Ray said, starting to turn away. "I'll leave you to not cry in peace." "Wait," the child said, the musical quality of their voice pitching higher. Can you help me? I'm not supposed to ask for help either, but... Ray turned back. What do you need? The child pointed to their feet, and Ray noticed for the first time that they were wearing what appeared to be ceremonial footwear, elaborate constructions that were somewhere between shoes and works of art. One was perfectly arranged, but the other was partially undone, with complex fastenings hanging loose. I can't tie it properly, the child admitted. The confirmation ceremony is tomorrow, and I'm practicing, but I can't get it right. If I can't do it myself, I'll bring shame to my lineage. Ray approached cautiously and knelt down to examine the footwear. The fastenings weren't exactly laces, but more like a complex series of interlocking clasps and decorative chains. These are pretty complicated, he said. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? I have experienced 12 orbital cycles, the child replied, which Ray mentally converted to roughly 9 Earth years. And you're expected to tie these yourself? Ray asked, examining the intricate pattern. The child's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with what Ray interpreted as embarrassment. It is tradition. To be worthy of my station, I must present myself with dignity. The footwear is symbolic of our connection to the path of ancestry. Ray nodded thoughtfully. On Earth, we have shoes with laces that kids learn to tie. It's not quite as elaborate, but it's also a milestone. My youngest had trouble with it too. Your offspring struggled with ceremonial attire? The child seemed genuinely surprised. Sure did. Cried about it too. Ray smiled at the memory. Nothing to be ashamed of. Learning takes time. The child's patterns shifted to a slower pulse. But I don't have time. The ceremony is tomorrow, and if I fail... They didn't finish the sentence, but the distress in their voice was clear. Ray considered his options. Helping would definitely violate protocol, but he couldn't just walk away. Tell you what, he said, I'll show you how it's done, step by step, and then you can practice until you get it right. Would that work? The child hesitated, then nodded. That would be acceptable. Ray examined the complex fastening system more carefully. After a moment, he began to see the pattern. I think I understand how these work. It's actually pretty clever. Watch carefully now. With deliberate movements, Ray began to demonstrate the sequence of folds and clasps required to secure the elaborate footwear. The child watched intently as Ray's weathered hands manipulated the delicate fastenings. When he finished, the result matched the perfectly arranged shoe on the child's other foot. There, Ray said. Now let's undo it, and you try. The child's attempt was clumsy at first, their long fingers struggling with the precise movements required. Ray provided gentle guidance, showing incredible patience as the child tried again and again. After the 5th attempt, they managed to secure one of the clasps correctly. That's it, Ray encouraged. You're getting it. As they continued practicing, the child gradually became more comfortable with the process. Their bioluminescent patterns shifted to a calmer, more rhythmic pulse. After nearly an hour of practice, they finally managed to complete the entire sequence without assistance. I did it! The child exclaimed, their voice lilting with excitement. You sure did, Ray said, smiling. Just keep practicing, and you'll have it down perfectly for tomorrow. The child looked at Ray with those large, solid black eyes. Thank you, they said, the words carrying more weight than their simple meaning. You've prevented great shame for my lineage. Ray shrugged. Just helping out. Like I said, where I come from, that's what we do. What is your designation? The child asked. My name's Ray. Ray Thompson. I am Nexar, first scion of the Imperial bloodline, heir to the eternal throne of Tarka, vessel of the ancestral light. The child, Nexar, recited the titles with practiced formality before adding more simply, Second Phase Prince of the Tarkani Empire. Ray blinked, suddenly realizing exactly who he'd been helping. the heir to the most powerful empire in the sector, had been sitting here practicing how to tie his ceremonial shoes, and Ray had just spent an hour teaching him. Protocol violation didn't begin to cover it. "Well, Your Highness," Ray said, trying to recover some semblance of propriety, "it was an honor to assist you, but I should probably get back to my duties before someone notices I'm not where I'm supposed to be." Nexar nodded. "Yes, it would be problematic for both of us if this interaction were discovered." Ray gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, but Nexar spoke again. "Ray Thompson, I will remember your kindness." "Think nothing of it, Your Highness." "Good luck with your ceremony tomorrow?" As Ray pushed his cart toward the exit, Nexar called out one more question. The offspring that struggled with their attire, did they eventually master it? Ray looked back over his shoulder. She did, and now she ties her brother's shoes when they're in a hurry. "You'll get it, Your Highness. Just takes practice." With that, Ray left the ceremonial hall, returning to his regular cleaning route. He didn't mention the encounter to anyone. There was no point risking his position over what was ultimately just a small kindness. By the next day, he had almost convinced himself that the prudent thing would be to forget the whole incident. The confirmation ceremony was scheduled for the Ascendant period, which meant Ray was off duty during the actual event. He spent the morning in his small quarters, reviewing a recorded message from his daughter back on Earth. At 22, she was now studying xenobiology at university, her education partially funded by Ray's off-world salary. His two sons were both in technical training, preparing for their own potential careers among the stars. The sacrifices were worth it for the opportunities his children would have. Ray's shift began 6 hours after the ceremony concluded. When he arrived at the janitorial staging area, the atmosphere was tense. His supervisor, a Feroxian with mottled green skin and 4 eyes positioned around his skull, pulled Ray aside immediately. "Thompson, what did you do?" the Feroxian demanded, all 4 eyes blinking in agitation. Ray's stomach dropped. "Sir, the Tarkani delegation has requested you specifically for cleanup duties in the ceremonial hall. Not the team. You. Just you." The supervisor leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of the mineral compounds his species consumed. "That doesn't happen, Thompson, ever. What did you do?" "I just cleaned their area like always," Ray said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Maybe they liked my work." The supervisor didn't look convinced, but he had no choice. "Report to the ceremonial hall immediately, and Thompson, if you've done something to offend them, I can't protect you." Ray nodded and gathered his cleaning cart, his mind racing. Had Nexar said something? Was he in trouble? The walk to the ceremonial hall felt longer than usual, each step bringing him closer to what could be a diplomatic incident that ended with him being fired, or worse. When Ray entered the ceremonial hall, he found it empty, except for the scattered evidence of the ceremony, discarded ceremonial items, symbolic offerings, and the general disarray left by any large gathering. He began cleaning methodically, working his way from the entrance toward the central platform. He was scrubbing a particularly stubborn stain when he heard the door to the hall open and close. Ray straightened up, turning to see who had entered, and immediately froze. Standing by the entrance was a tall, imposing Tarkani male wearing the elaborate regalia that marked him as high nobility. The bioluminescent patterns across his blue-silver skin were complex and bright, indicating elevated status. It was Emperor Vexus himself. Ray immediately lowered his eyes and bowed, as protocol demanded. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "Forgive the intrusion. I was assigned to clean the hall." The Emperor approached with measured steps. Tarkani were taller than humans by about a foot, and the Emperor was tall even for his species. He towered over Ray, his presence filling the room with an almost physical pressure. "You are the human called Ray Thompson," Emperor Vexus said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty." "Look at me, human." Ray hesitated, then raised his eyes. The Emperor's face was impassive, his solid black eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. "My son told me what transpired last night," the Emperor said, his musical voice deeper and more resonant than Nexar's. "He informed me that you provided assistance with his ceremonial attire." Ray swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. I apologize for the violation of protocol. The prince was distressed and I—" The Emperor raised a four-fingered hand, silencing Ray. The confirmation ceremony was witnessed by 17 noble houses and diplomatic representatives from 23 stellar nations. My son performed his duties flawlessly. His presentation brought honor to our lineage. Ray wasn't sure how to respond, so he remained silent. "I observed your interaction with him," the Emperor continued. "I was present, though concealed, evaluating my son's dedication to his preparations." Ray's blood ran cold. The Emperor had seen everything, every protocol violation, every casual word. "You showed him patience," the Emperor said. "You taught rather than completed the task for him. You offered encouragement without condescension. These are unexpected qualities." "I just did what anyone would do," Ray said, then winced at his informality. I'm honored that I could be of assistance, Your Imperial Majesty." The Emperor's head tilted slightly. "No, human. What you did is not what anyone would do. The 17 noble houses present today would have completed the task for him or reported his failure. They would not have taught him." The Emperor moved to the central platform and gestured for Ray to follow. Unsure what else to do, Ray complied, standing awkwardly beside his mop as the ruler of the most powerful empire in the sector gazed out at the nebula visible through the viewport. "Our understanding of humans has been limited," the Emperor said after a long pause. "We observed your wars, your divisions, your primitive technology. We determined your species to be aggressive, but ultimately inconsequential." Ray remained silent, uncertain where this was going. "Yet in our observations, we failed to account for certain qualities. My advisors documented human resilience and adaptability, but dismissed them as survival mechanisms, typical of less advanced species. What they failed to note was the application of these qualities toward others." The Emperor's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a configuration Ray had never seen before. "Your willingness to assist without expectation of gain. Your patience with those who consider themselves your superiors. These were overlooked." The Emperor turned to face Ray directly. "My son will one day rule an empire spanning 300 worlds. The lesson you provided him may prove more valuable than all the diplomatic training he has received thus far." Ray shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just glad I could help, Your Imperial Majesty." "Yes," the Emperor said thoughtfully. "That is precisely the point. You are just glad you could help. This simplicity conceals something our analyses failed to capture." He paused, his patterns pulsing slowly. "I wish to understand it better." Before Ray could respond, the door to the ceremonial hall opened again, and Nexar entered. The young prince was still wearing his ceremonial attire, including the perfectly arranged footwear. When he saw his father standing with Ray, he froze momentarily, then approached with formal precision. "Father," Nexar said, bowing deeply, "I was told you wished to see me." "Yes," the Emperor said. "I wanted to introduce you properly to Ray Thompson. It seems we have underestimated the potential value of human perspective." Nexar looked from his father to Ray, confusion evident in his bioluminescent patterns. "But he's a servitor. He is a human who assisted the heir to the Tarkani Empire without thought of reward or recognition," the Emperor corrected. and in doing so, he has revealed an oversight in our understanding. The Emperor turned back to Rey. The Tarkani delegation will be remaining on the Celestial Nexus for another 60 cycles. During that time, I wish for you to provide my son with regular instruction. Instruction? Rey asked, confused. In what, Your Imperial Majesty? In human perspectives, the Emperor replied. The qualities you demonstrated, patience, empathy, assistance without hierarchy, these may have strategic value we have not previously considered. Rey blinked in surprise. You want me to teach the prince how to be nice to people? The Emperor's patterns shifted again. An oversimplification, but essentially correct. Your species has achieved diplomatic integration far more rapidly than our models predicted. I believe these qualities may be part of the explanation. Nexar looked up at his father. Is this a test, father? All experiences are tests, my son, the Emperor replied. But this is also an opportunity. The future Emperor of Tarka must understand all potential strategic advantages, including those we may have dismissed. Rey looked between the royal pair, still trying to process what was happening. I'm not sure I'm qualified for this kind of thing, Your Imperial Majesty. I'm just a janitor. Yet you taught an imperial prince how to tie his ceremonial shoes when 17 noble houses would have deemed it beneath them, the Emperor said. Perhaps that is precisely the qualification required. And so began Rey Thompson's most unusual assignment. By imperial decree, he was relieved of his normal janitorial duties and assigned exclusively to what was officially termed cultural exchange duties with the Tarkani delegation. 3 times each week, Rey would meet with Prince Nexar for what the Emperor called perspective instruction. At first, these sessions were awkward. Nexar had been raised from birth to embody the cold, calculating dignity expected of Tarkani nobility. The concept of casual interaction was foreign to him. Rey, for his part, had no idea how to teach someone to be kind. It wasn't something he'd ever thought about as a skill to be learned. It was just how his parents had raised him. Let's start with something simple, Rey suggested during their 3rd session. When you see someone struggling with a task, what's your first thought? Nexar considered the question with typical Tarkani thoroughness. I evaluate whether their struggle indicates a weakness that could be exploited, or if their failure would create a tactical disadvantage for our objectives. Rey rubbed his face. Okay, that's not exactly what I was getting at. What about just helping them because they need help, without analyzing the strategic benefit? Nexar seemed genuinely confused. Yes, just helping because it's the right thing to do. The prince's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what Rey had come to recognize as deep thought. This concept requires further examination. The right thing, by what metric? Rey sighed. This was going to be harder than he'd anticipated. As the weeks passed, however, something unexpected happened. Nexar began to change. It started with small things. Questions about Rey's family, interest in human customs, attempts at what the prince called non-strategic conversation. Rey shared stories about Earth, about raising his children, about the communities he'd been part of before taking the position on the Celestial Nexus. During their 12th session, Nexar asked a question that caught Rey by surprise. Your offspring, do you miss them? Rey nodded, a familiar ache in his chest. Every day. But the work here pays enough that they'll have opportunities I never had. Sometimes being a parent means making sacrifices. Sacrifice without strategic gain, Nexar asked, though the question no longer carried the same confusion it might have weeks earlier. The gain isn't for me, Rey explained. It's for them. That's enough. Nexar was quiet for a long moment. I believe I am beginning to understand the concept you call compassion. It is more complex than our analysts suggested. Rey smiled. Most important things are. The true test came unexpectedly during their 15th session. As they walked through the public areas of the station, a new element Ray had introduced to their lessons, they encountered a Feroxian child who had become separated from their guardian. The child was clearly distressed, their four eyes blinking rapidly in alarm. Ray started to approach, but Nexar moved first. With careful movements that would not appear threatening to a Feroxian, the prince knelt down to the child's level. "Are you lost?" he asked, his musical voice gentle. The Feroxian child stared at the Tarkani prince with wide eyes. Members of species that rarely interacted with Tarkani royalty might go their entire lives without such a direct encounter. But the prince's posture and tone seemed to reassure the child. "I can't find my parental unit," the child said, voice quavering. "We will help you locate them," Nexar assured the child. He looked up at Ray with what might have been the Tarkani equivalent of a smile. "This is the right thing to do, is it not?" Ray nodded, a surge of pride warming his chest. "It absolutely is." They escorted the child to the station's security post, where the frantic Feroxian parent was already filing a report. The reunion was emotional, with the parent wrapping all 6 limbs around their child in relief. What happened next, however, truly shocked Ray. The Feroxian parent turned to thank them and realized they were standing before Tarkani royalty. They immediately dropped into a formal posture of deference. "Your Highness, I am deeply grateful for your assistance. The House of Marok acknowledges this debt of honor." Ray expected Nexar to accept the formality with typical Tarkani dignity. Instead, the prince shook his head. "No debt is owed. I was simply providing assistance because it was needed." He glanced at Ray before adding, "It was the right thing to do." The Feroxian seemed confused by this response, but grateful nonetheless. As they left the security post, Ray couldn't help but smile. "You're getting it," he told the prince. "I believe I am," Nexar agreed. "Though my father's advisors would consider this interaction strategically suboptimal." "And what do you think?" Ray asked. Nexar's patterns pulsed thoughtfully. "I think there is strength in being viewed not only with fear and respect, but also with gratitude and goodwill. The strategic implications are significant." Ray laughed. "Still thinking like a Tarkani, I see." "I am Tarkani," Nexar pointed out, "but perhaps being Tarkani can mean more than we have previously allowed." Word of the prince's actions spread quickly through the diplomatic station. The sight of Tarkani royalty personally assisting a distressed child of another species was unprecedented. Ray began to notice subtle changes in how other species representatives interacted with the Tarkani delegation. Less fear, more genuine engagement. Emperor Vexus observed these changes with keen interest. After 27 sessions, he summoned Ray to a private audience. The human janitor, now known throughout the station as the Prince's Perspective Instructor, entered the Imperial quarters with considerably less anxiety than he might have felt 2 months earlier. "Ray Thompson," the Emperor greeted him, "your instruction has produced unexpected results." "Is that good or bad, Your Imperial Majesty?" Ray asked. "It is, informative," the Emperor replied. 3 diplomatic negotiations that had reached impasse have resumed progress. Trade representatives from the Feroxian hegemony have offered concessions they previously refused to consider. The Alteran Confederation has proposed a cultural exchange program with Tarkani worlds. Ray waited, unsure how to respond. "My son has initiated these changes through what you might call non-strategic kindness," the Emperor continued. "Yet the strategic benefits are undeniable." His patterns shifted to a configuration Ray had come to recognize as amusement. "It seems we have much to learn from human janitors." "Just doing my job, Your Imperial Majesty," Ray said with a small smile. "Indeed." The Emperor's patterns became more serious. "The Tarkani delegation will be departing the Celestial Nexus in 12 cycles. Our diplomatic mission here is concluding. Ray nodded, feeling a surprising pang of sadness. He had grown fond of Nexar, watching the young prince evolve from a rigid embodiment of Tarkani tradition to something more complex and nuanced. I understand. It's been an honor to work with Prince Nexar. The honor, the Emperor said, may have been ours. He paused, his patterns pulsing slowly. I have a proposal for you, Ray Thompson. A proposal? The Tarkani Empire would benefit from continued exposure to human perspective. We would like to offer you a position within the imperial household as cultural perspective advisor to the first scion. Ray stared at the Emperor in shock. You want me to come with you? To the Tarkani homeworld? Yes. Your contract with the Celestial Nexus would be transferred to Imperial service, with significantly improved compensation and provisions for regular communication with your family on Earth. In time, arrangements could be made for them to join you, if desired. The offer was breathtaking in its scope. From janitor to advisor, to the heir of an interstellar empire, it was beyond anything Ray could have imagined when he took the position on the station 3 years ago. This is... I don't know what to say, Your Imperial Majesty. Consider carefully, the Emperor advised. The Tarkani homeworld is very different from Earth or this station. You would be the only human in the Imperial Court, perhaps the only human on the planet. The pressure would be considerable. Ray thought of his children back on Earth. With the salary the Emperor was offering, he could provide them with education and opportunities beyond even what he'd hoped. More importantly, he would be part of something transformative, a shift in how one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations viewed humanity and other species. I would be honored to accept, Your Imperial Majesty, Ray said, on one condition. The Emperor's patterns flickered with surprise. Few beings dared to place conditions on Imperial offers. Speak. I want to continue my regular janitorial duties alongside the advisory role, Ray said. It keeps me grounded, reminds me who I am. The day I stop being willing to clean floors is the day my perspective won't be worth hearing. For a moment, the Emperor was silent. Then, to Ray's astonishment, a sound emerged that Ray had never heard before. A Tarkani laugh, musical and resonant. You continue to prove the value of your unique perspective, Ray Thompson, the Emperor said. Your condition is accepted. And so it was that Ray Thompson, human janitor, prepared to depart for the heart of the Tarkani Empire, all because he had stopped to help a crying prince tie his shoes. The journey to Tarka Prime took 17 Earth days aboard the Imperial flagship, the Resplendent Dominion. Ray spent most of that time preparing for his new role, studying Tarkani culture and protocol with the help of educational programs provided by the Imperial staff. He also continued his lessons with Prince Nexar, their relationship evolving from instructor and student to something closer to friendship, though always with the formality required by Tarkani custom. Will your quarters on Tarka Prime have a window? Nexar asked during one of their sessions in the ship's observation deck. They were watching the hyperspatial distortion field that surrounded the vessel during faster-than-light travel. A swirling vortex of colors that most species found disorienting, but humans seemed to enjoy. I haven't thought about it, Ray admitted. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'm going to be living on an alien planet. Nexar's patterns shifted in what Ray had come to recognize as amusement. It is not alien to me. Fair point, Your Highness. You should have a window, Nexar decided. The Imperial Palace overlooks the luminous sea. When the 3 moons align, the waters glow with bioluminescent life. It is beautiful. The prince seemed almost embarrassed by the admission, as if appreciating beauty for its own sake was still unfamiliar territory. Ray smiled. I'd like that. As the flagship approached Tarkani space, Ray's communication pad received a message from Earth, a video call from his 3 children. He accepted it immediately, their faces appearing on the screen. "Dad," his daughter exclaimed, "is it true? Are you really going to be living in the Tarkani Empire?" Ray nodded. "It's true, Sarah. I've been offered a position as a cultural advisor. The pay is, well, it's more than I ever thought I'd make." His oldest son, Michael, leaned forward. "But the Tarkani are supposed to be dangerous. Everyone says they look down on humans." "That's changing," Ray said. "Slowly, but it is. That's part of why they want me there, to help bridge the cultural gap." His youngest son, Daniel, had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "Will you come home soon?" Ray felt the familiar ache in his chest. "Not right away, buddy. But the Emperor has agreed that once I'm established, you three can visit, maybe even come live with me if you want to." The conversation continued, his children alternating between excitement about his opportunity and concern for his safety. By the time they disconnected, Ray had promised to send regular updates and to arrange a visit as soon as possible. He sat in his quarters afterward, staring at the blank screen, wondering if he was making the right choice. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, he found Emperor Vexus himself standing in the corridor. "Your Imperial Majesty," Ray said, bowing deeply. "This is unexpected." "May I enter?" the Emperor asked, a formality that seemed strange given his absolute authority. "Of course." The Emperor had to duck slightly to pass through the doorway, his tall frame not quite accommodated by the human-sized quarters. He examined the small room with interest, noting the few personal items Ray had brought from the station. A physical photograph of his children, a small stone carving his daughter had made, a well-worn paper book. "You were communicating with your offspring," the Emperor stated. "Yes," Ray confirmed, wondering how the Emperor knew. "Our communication systems noted the outgoing transmission to Earth," the Emperor explained, seeing Ray's confusion. "Security protocols." "I see." The Emperor's patterns pulsed slowly. "They are concerned for your safety among us." It wasn't a question, but Ray answered anyway. "They've only heard stories about the Tarkani Empire. Most humans have." "Ah, and what stories are those?" the Emperor asked, genuine curiosity in his musical voice. Ray hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "That the Tarkani are cold, calculating, and view other species as inferior. That your empire expands through intimidation and strategic pressure rather than open warfare. That humans are barely tolerated in Tarkani space." The Emperor was silent for a moment. "These assessments are not entirely inaccurate, historically speaking." His patterns shifted. "Though recent events may necessitate revision." "Recent events being a janitor helping a prince tie his shoes?" Ray asked with a small smile. "That event revealed an oversight in our strategic understanding," the Emperor replied. "One that may have significant implications for the future of our species' interaction." The Emperor moved to the small viewport in Ray's quarters, gazing out at the hyperspatial distortion. "The Tarkani Empire has endured for over 12,000 years, Ray Thompson. We have survived by adapting when necessary, by incorporating useful elements from conquered or allied civilizations. Our apparent rigidity conceals a pragmatic core." Ray nodded, beginning to understand. "And you think human kindness might be useful to incorporate?" "Not merely useful," the Emperor said, turning back to face him. "Potentially transformative. Your species achieved in 50 years of galactic integration what took others centuries. Initial analyses attributed this to your biological adaptability or your primitive aggressive instincts, but observation suggests another factor may be equally significant. Our ability to make friends, Ray suggested. An oversimplification but not inaccurate, the Emperor acknowledged. Your species forms cooperative bonds rapidly, even with those anatomically and culturally dissimilar to yourselves. This has strategic value we fail to fully appreciate. Ray considered this. So, bringing me to Tarka Prime is an experiment to see if Tarkani can learn this skill. All Imperial initiatives have experimental components, the Emperor replied, but my son's transformation suggests the experiment may already be yielding results. Before Ray could respond, another chime indicated they were approaching Tarka Prime. The Emperor gestured toward the viewport. Observe. The ship emerged from hyperspatial travel, the swirling colors giving way to normal space. Framed in the small viewport was a planet unlike any Ray had seen before. A world of deep blues and silver, with swirling cloud patterns that seemed to form deliberate geometric shapes. 3 moons of varying sizes were visible, their surfaces reflecting the light of the system's star. "Tarka Prime," the Emperor said, a note of pride in his voice. "Your new home." The descent to the planet's surface was conducted with typical Tarkani precision. Ray was provided with a breathing apparatus. The atmosphere was compatible with human physiology, but contained higher concentrations of certain gases that could cause discomfort during initial adaptation. The Imperial flagship docked at an orbital station, and from there they transferred to smaller vessels designed for atmospheric entry. Ray's first glimpse of the Imperial capital took his breath away. The city rose from the edge of what must be the luminous sea that Nexar had mentioned, a vast body of water with unusual silver-blue coloration. The architecture was unlike anything on Earth or the celestial nexus, all sweeping curves and geometric precision, with bioluminescent elements that pulsed in patterns similar to Tarkani skin. The Imperial Palace dominated the cityscape, a massive structure that seemed to flow from the natural rock formations at the sea's edge, extending upward in graceful spires that caught the light of the setting sun. As their transport vessel approached, Ray noticed that parts of the palace appeared to be alive, with surfaces that shifted and adjusted like the patterns on Tarkani's skin. "Living architecture," Nexar explained, seeing Ray's fascination. "The outer layers of the palace are comprised of engineered organisms that respond to environmental conditions and imperial needs." "It's beautiful," Ray said honestly. The prince's patterns pulsed with pride. "It has stood for 8,000 years, adapting and growing with each generation." Their arrival at the palace was met with elaborate ceremony. Hundreds of Tarkani nobles and officials lined the approach, their bioluminescent patterns synchronized in what Ray assumed was a display of respect for the Emperor's return. As Ray followed behind the Imperial family, he felt the weight of countless black eyes tracking his movement, the first human most of them had ever seen in person. Ray's quarters in the palace exceeded anything he could have imagined. As Nexar had promised, he had a window, or rather an entire wall, that could become transparent, offering a panoramic view of the luminous sea. The living architecture responded to his presence, adjusting lighting and environmental conditions to human preferences. There was even a small garden of earth plants, carefully cultivated in a special atmospheric enclosure. "Is it satisfactory?" Nexar asked, having personally escorted Ray to his new home. "It's incredible," Ray said, still taking it all in. "Far more than I expected." "You are the cultural perspective advisor to the first scion," Nexar reminded him. "Your status reflects on the Imperial household." Ray laughed. "A few months ago, I was scrubbing floors. Now I have a title longer than my name." Nexar's patterns shifted in what might have been embarrassment. "You will continue janitorial duties as well, as per your condition. A cleaning area has been established adjacent to your quarters. However, I must inform you that this arrangement has caused considerable confusion among the palace staff." "I bet it has," Ray said, smiling. "But it's important. The day I think I'm too good to clean a floor is the day I forget where I came from." The prince nodded thoughtfully. "This perspective may be precisely why you are valuable to us, Ray Thompson." The following days were a whirlwind of orientation and introduction. Ray was presented to the imperial court, a formal ceremony that involved standing perfectly still while hundreds of Tarkani nobles examined him with barely concealed curiosity. He met the emperor's advisors, most of whom regarded him with thinly veiled skepticism. He was assigned assistants, instructors in Tarkani language and custom, and security personnel who were never more than a few meters away. Through it all, Ray maintained his insistence on performing regular janitorial duties. Every morning, before his official responsibilities began, he would spend 2 hours cleaning a section of the palace. The Tarkani staff found this behavior incomprehensible, a being of his status performing manual labor, but Ray was adamant. It became something of a palace curiosity, with nobles sometimes finding excuses to pass through whichever area Ray was cleaning, observing the human phenomenon with fascination. Ray's primary duty, however, was continuing Prince Nexar's education in human perspective. Their sessions expanded to include practical applications, visits to Tarkani cities, interactions with citizens from various social strata, and eventually diplomatic engagements with representatives from other species. 6 months after Ray's arrival on Tarka Prime, a diplomatic delegation from Earth was scheduled to visit, the first official human diplomatic mission to the Tarkani homeworld. The news filled Ray with both excitement and anxiety. This would be a critical moment in human-Tarkani relations, and he would play a central role. The night before the delegation's arrival, Ray was cleaning one of the smaller ceremonial halls when he noticed Prince Nexar watching him from the doorway. "Your Highness," Ray acknowledged, continuing his work. "It's late for you to be up." "I am contemplating tomorrow's events," Nexar replied, entering the hall. The prince had grown noticeably in the months since they'd left the celestial nexus, his frame beginning to take on the imposing height of adult Tarkani. The human delegation represents a significant diplomatic opportunity. Ray nodded, wringing out his mop. "It's a big step. First time human diplomats have been invited to Tarka Prime." "Because of you," Nexar said simply. Ray looked up, surprised. "I don't think I can take credit for that. My father would disagree." The prince moved to one of these ceremonial platforms, his patterns pulsing thoughtfully. "Before your arrival, the Imperial analysts predicted human integration into galactic affairs would proceed at approximately 1/3 its current pace. Your species was classified as a minor concern, warranting minimal diplomatic investment." "And now?" Ray asked, leaning on his mop. "Now you are classified as a priority diplomatic initiative. Trade agreements have been authorized. Cultural exchange programs are being developed." Nexar's patterns shifted to a configuration Ray had come to recognize as amusement. All because a janitor stopped to help a crying prince. Ray smiled. "I wasn't thinking about galactic diplomacy at the time. You were just a kid who needed help." "That," Nexar said, "is precisely the point. The capacity to act beyond strategic calculation is powerful, more powerful than our models predicted." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the prince watching as Ray finished cleaning the hall. "Ray," Nexar said finally, using the human's first name without title, something he did only when they were alone. "Do you believe our two species can truly understand each other?" Ray considered the question carefully. "I think we can understand enough. Perfect understanding might not be possible between any two beings, let alone different species. But understanding enough to respect each other, to work together. Yeah, I think we can manage that." "The delegation tomorrow includes your offspring, does it not?" Nexar asked. Ray nodded, a surge of emotion tightening his throat. "All 3 of them. They're coming as part of the Educational Exchange Committee. It's been almost a year since I've seen them in person. You are excited? Excited, nervous, proud, all of it mixed together, Ray admitted. Nexar's patterns pulsed with what Ray had come to recognize as determination. Then we must ensure the reception is perfect. The first impression of Taka Prime should honor their connection to you. The next morning, Ray waited with the Imperial Reception Committee at the spaceport, his heart pounding with anticipation. The human delegation's ship entered Tarkani atmosphere on schedule, its design markedly different from the angular precision of Tarkani vessels. As it landed and the ramp extended, Ray straightened his formal attire, a compromise between Tarkani's ceremonial garb and human styling that the Emperor's tailors had designed specifically for him. The Earth diplomats emerged first, their expressions carefully neutral but their eyes wide as they took in the alien landscape. Behind them came the various committee representatives, and among them, Ray spotted them immediately, his children. Protocol dictated that he remain in formation with the Imperial staff until the formal introductions were complete. The Earth ambassador approached Emperor Vexus and offered the ceremonial greeting that Ray had helped design, a gesture that acknowledged Tarkani authority while maintaining human dignity. The Emperor responded with the appropriate counter-gesture, and the formal exchange of diplomatic recognition was complete. Then, to the surprise of both delegations, Emperor Vexus spoke. Before we proceed with diplomatic formalities, there is a matter of personal significance to address. He turned to Ray. Cultural Perspective Advisor Thompson, you are released from protocol to greet your offspring. A murmur ran through both delegations at this unprecedented break from ceremony. Ray hesitated only a moment before stepping forward, and then his children were running toward him, protocol forgotten, as they collided in a family embrace that brought tears to his eyes. "Dad!" Sarah exclaimed, now 23, and looking so grown up in her committee uniform. "This place is incredible!" Michael and Daniel were talking over each other, pointing out features of the Tarkani landscape, asking questions about the palace visible in the distance. Ray held them tightly, hardly able to believe they were really here. When he finally looked up, he saw the entire reception committee watching with expressions ranging from confusion to fascination. The Tarkani concept of family was very different from the human version. More formalized, less emotionally demonstrative. The scene playing out before them was completely outside their experience. Emperor Vexus was observing with particular intensity, his patterns pulsing in a configuration Ray couldn't interpret. Beside him, Prince Nexar's patterns displayed what Ray had come to recognize as pleasure. The diplomatic formalities resumed shortly afterward, but the tone had subtly shifted. The human delegation, witnessing the Emperor's accommodation of Ray's family reunion, seemed to relax slightly. The Tarkani representatives, taking their cue from the imperial family, showed greater flexibility in the ceremonial proceedings. That evening, a formal reception was held in the grand ceremonial hall of the palace. Ray, now officially part of the Tarkani diplomatic team rather than the Earth delegation, found himself in the unusual position of being both host and guest. He moved between the two groups, facilitating conversations, explaining cultural nuances, bridging the gap between species. "So you really clean floors every morning?" his daughter asked, as they stood near one of the massive crystal viewports overlooking the luminous sea. "Even though you're some kind of imperial advisor now?" Ray nodded. "It keeps me grounded, reminds me who I am and where I came from." "That's why they respect you," Sarah said thoughtfully. "You're authentic. You don't try to be something you're not." Before Ray could respond, Prince Nexar approached them. The prince bowed slightly to Sarah, a gesture of respect rarely offered by Tarkani royalty to non-Tarkani. "First offspring Sarah Thompson, Nexar greeted her, using the Tarkani formal style. Your academic achievements in xenobiology have been noted with interest. The Imperial Science Academy would welcome your perspective. Sarah blinked in surprise. You know about my research? I make it my business to know about matters important to Ray Thompson, the prince replied. His offspring's accomplishments are significant to him. Therefore, they are significant to the Imperial household. Ray watched with pride as his daughter engaged the Tarkani prince in a discussion of comparative biology, her initial nervousness giving way to professional enthusiasm as Nexar demonstrated genuine interest in her work. Across the hall, he could see Michael deep in conversation with a Tarkani engineering representative, while Daniel was being shown a model of the palace's living architecture by one of the Imperial designers. They are adapting well, Emperor Vexus observed, appearing silently beside Ray. Humans are good at that, Ray replied. Especially young ones. The Emperor's patterns shifted thoughtfully. The reception has exceeded diplomatic projections. The human ambassador has already proposed 3 additional cooperative initiatives beyond the planned agenda. Ray smiled. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens when people just get to know each other as people, not as representatives of their species. A human perspective, the Emperor noted, yet increasingly I find value in such perspectives. He paused, watching as Nexar and Sarah continued their animated discussion. My son has changed since meeting you, Ray Thompson. He sees beyond traditional Tarkani calculations now. He considers factors our strategic models previously deemed irrelevant. Is that good or bad? Ray asked. It is. The future, the Emperor replied. The galaxy is changing. Species that once operated in isolation now find themselves interconnected. Old models of dominance and submission are proving less effective than anticipated. Your species has demonstrated remarkable integration capabilities. Perhaps there are lessons to be learned. Ray nodded, understanding the magnitude of what the Emperor was saying. The Tarkani Empire, after 12,000 years of calculated expansion and strategic dominance, was considering a different approach, one influenced by a human janitor who had stopped to help a crying prince. The diplomatic visit extended beyond its original schedule, with both sides finding unexpected common ground. Ray's children were invited to extend their stay, with Sarah accepting a temporary research position at the Imperial Science Academy and his sons enrolling in specialized educational programs that combined Tarkani and human approaches. 6 months after the initial delegation, a permanent human embassy was established on Tarka Prime, the first non-Tarkani diplomatic installation ever permitted on the Imperial homeworld. Ray was officially recognized as the liaison between the embassy and the Imperial household, a position that formalized the bridge-building role he had been playing since his arrival. 1 year to the day after Ray had first set foot on Tarkani soil, he was summoned to a private audience with Emperor Vexus. The Emperor received him in the Imperial Contemplation Chamber, a space few non-Tarkani had ever entered. Ray Thompson, the Emperor greeted him. Your service to the Imperial household has been noted with highest approval. Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty, Ray replied, bowing deeply. It's been an honor. The Emperor gestured for Ray to approach the central platform, where a holographic display showed the Tarkani Empire's territory, hundreds of worlds spanning a significant portion of the galactic arm. For 12,000 years, the Tarkani Empire has expanded through strategic dominance, the Emperor said. Our diplomatic, economic, and occasionally military pressure has secured our position as a primary galactic power. This approach has served us well, until now. Ray remained silent, sensing there was more to come. The emergence of new species, new technologies and new alliances has altered the galactic equation, the Emperor continued. Traditional methods of expansion are meeting increasing resistance. Efficiency models suggest that continued adherence to historical strategies will result in diminishing returns. The holographic display shifted, showing new configurations, potential alliances, trade routes that didn't exist before. The Imperial Strategic Council has recommended a revised approach, the Emperor said, one that incorporates elements of what we have termed the Thompson paradigm. Ray blinked in surprise. The what? The Emperor's patterns shifted in what might have been amusement. Your influence has been formalized into diplomatic theory, Ray Thompson. The capacity to form cooperative bonds based on mutual respect rather than strategic necessity. The willingness to assist without immediate benefit. The recognition of emotional factors in diplomatic calculations. I'm honored, Ray said, somewhat stunned. But all I did was help a kid tie his shoes. And in doing so, revealed a blind spot in our strategic understanding that had persisted for millennia, the Emperor replied. The Thompson paradigm suggests that long-term diplomatic success may depend not only on calculated advantage, but on genuine connection. The holographic display changed again, showing Earth and Taka Prime, with lines of connection between them growing and strengthening. The Human-Tarkani Alliance is now classified as a priority imperial initiative, the Emperor continued. Trade volume has increased by 400%. Cultural exchange programs have expanded to 17 imperial worlds. Military coordination protocols are being developed. Ray watched the display with a sense of wonder, all of this stemming from one small act of kindness in a ceremonial hall on the celestial nexus. There is another matter, the Emperor said, his patterns shifting to a more formal configuration. Prince Nexar has completed his secondary educational phase. Tradition dictates that he now undertake diplomatic service before assuming greater imperial responsibilities. Ray nodded. He was familiar with this aspect of Tarkani royal training. The prince has requested a specific diplomatic assignment, the Emperor continued. He wishes to serve as the first Tarkani ambassador to Earth. Ray's eyes widened. That's unprecedented. Indeed, no member of the Imperial bloodline has ever served as ambassador to a non-Tarkani world. The Emperor's patterns pulsed slowly. Yet the Strategic Council has approved the request. The potential diplomatic value outweighs the deviation from tradition. He'll do well, Ray said with certainty. He understands humans better than any Tarkani. Because of you, the Emperor acknowledged. And he has requested that you accompany him as his cultural perspective advisor. Your children would, of course, return to Earth with you. The offer took Ray's breath away. Return to Earth with his children while continuing his work with Nexar. It seemed too perfect. There is, however, a condition, the Emperor added. What condition? Ray asked. The prince insists that you maintain your janitorial duties even on Earth. He believes this practice is fundamental to the perspective you provide. Ray laughed, a sound that still seemed to fascinate the Emperor. I think I can manage that. And so it was that 2 years after a human janitor had helped a crying alien prince tie his shoes, the heir to the Tarkani Empire arrived on Earth as the first Imperial ambassador, with Ray Thompson at his side. The diplomatic experts and politicians couldn't explain exactly how this unprecedented alliance had formed so quickly. But Ray understood. Sometimes the greatest changes begin with the smallest kindnesses. Sometimes helping someone tie their shoes can change the course of galactic history. As the Tarkani diplomatic vessel descended toward Earth, Ray stood beside Prince Nexar, no longer the crying child he'd met in the ceremonial hall, but a poised young diplomat ready to forge new connections between their worlds. Nervous? Ray asked. Nexar's patterns pulsed with what Ray now recognized easily as amusement. Tarkani royalty does not experience nervousness. Of course not, Ray said, smiling. My mistake. The prince was quiet for a moment, watching as the blue-green surface of Earth grew larger in the viewport. "I have been contemplating our first meeting," he said finally. "If you had not stopped to help me that night—" "Someone else would have come along eventually," Ray suggested. "No," Nexar said with certainty. "They would not have. That is precisely why your action was significant. You did what no one else would have done, without calculation or expectation of benefit." As they prepared for landing, Nexar turned to Ray. "I never properly thanked you," the prince said, "for teaching me to tie my ceremonial shoes." Ray smiled. "You've thanked me plenty. Look at all this." He gestured toward Earth, toward the future they were building together. "Besides, I was just doing what anyone would do." "No," Nexar said, his voice carrying the musical quality that marked Tarkani emotion. "You were doing what humans would do, and that has made all the difference." The ship touched down on Earth, the ceremonial reception waiting to greet the first Tarkani royal ever to serve as ambassador to humanity. As the ramp extended and they prepared to disembark, Ray thought about how far they had come, from a chance encounter in a ceremonial hall to a transformative alliance between worlds, all because a janitor had stopped to help a crying prince tie his shoes, while an emperor watched in silence and learned. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.